following is a CUNY TV special presentation.
Commissioner, thank you for joining us. We know it's a quiet week for you. There's really nothing going on in New York, and I'm sure you had really nothing better to do than come here and talk to Abney. But as the city hosts the Holy Father, Pope Francis, and the General Assembly, where I think a record heads of state, nearly 200, will be attending, including the President of China and President Obama. And as you co-chair the Times Square Task Force, all while dealing with your day job, we really appreciate you coming here and talking to us about the issues that we all face in terms of New York City. With the significant discussions taking place on public safety, homelessness, Times Square, and other quality of life issues, the Commissioner and I spoke in August, and we thought it was important for him to have the opportunity in an unfiltered manner to discuss what you are doing, along with Mayor de Blasio and the entire NYPD, to continue to ensure that New York remains the safest big city in the country. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce and welcome back to our podium Police Commissioner Bill Bratton.
Thank you, Bill, again for that introduction and for the greeting that Abney always gives, and welcome to all of you this morning. I say that because it is a good morning, and it's been a good year in New York City, and this is going to be a good news speech, as I said, based on the facts. And one fact is that this is a celebratory week for our city. We have the Pope's visit. We have the largest gathering of world leaders in history. People want to be in the city. The city is indeed the center of the world. In fact, we're wrapping up what may be the busiest September in the department's history. We started in Queens with the U.S. Open. $700 million in 2 weeks. Mayor Dinkins, who was so instrumental in ensuring that the U.S. Open stayed in this city, $700 million in 2 weeks is spent by that entity here. And then we moved to Brooklyn for the Caribbean Day festivals and parades. And then school started, 1 million students, and the 9/11 anniversary events, and the 70th UN General Assembly coming up this week, and a subway series, and a visit from the Pope. And oh, by the way, the President's coming too. And of course, we still have our daily business of 911 and 311 calls to answer, 400,000 calls a month, actually the basic business of what we do. As you see, the map kind of gets a little cluttered there. Here's a partial list of the major events that your police department is dealing with. Overall, we have dozens of events at hundreds of locations requiring thousands of officers to be deployed at all hours of the day. This is in addition to the UN and the visit of the Pope and the visit of the President. And as we're handling this, we're still keeping crime down, although if you looked at the headlines this morning, you might wonder about that, but we'll talk about that. While serving people better, using less enforcement, but using that enforcement more intelligently, and repairing relationships inside and outside the department. Nearly 2 years ago, when I returned as police commissioner, there were those who wondered how we'd keep the momentum we started 20 years ago. Momentum that kept public safety in the city moving forward through a succession of mayors, beginning with Dave Dinkins, Ray Kelly, on through up to now myself and Mayor Bill de Blasio. Some of those people still wonder, and some still doubt, particularly in media pundits and predictors of peril and doom. If you believe headlines and hyperbole, you might think that crime is up, that disorder is rampant. I'm here to give you the real story. I live with it every day. Are these issues, real and perceived, important? Certainly, but they are all manageable over time. Just as we have managed to control crime and build economic prosperity over these last 20 years in this greatest of the world's cities, despite great challenges, and that's what New Yorkers, that's what we do best. We meet great challenges and we exceed expectations. Like dealing with terror after the occurrence of 9/11. When you look at all that has been done in 14 years down in that area of the city, it is nothing short of miraculous. The worst recession since the 1930s, hit this city in a big way. A natural disaster in the form of Superstorm Sandy. Yet here we are today, in 2015, resilient and moving forward. Just take a look around this city. Construction cranes everywhere, traffic obstructed because of that construction on every street, because there is construction underway on every street. In 1990, if anyone had predicted that the tabloids would feature weeks of breathless coverage of a guy dressed as Elmo and half-naked ladies, nobody would have ever believed it, that that was going to be the focus of attention for so much time. This city is moving in the right direction. Whether the naysayers are running for office or trying to sell papers or seeking ways to impugn the mayor, it doesn't change the numbers. They are not politicized, and I'll quote here, they are not politicized statistics, as charged yesterday by Comptroller Scott Stringer. By making that charge, he denigrates the hard work of the 52,000 men and women of this department who work very hard to produce the statistics that I'll be giving you this morning. We don't have politicized statistics. We have crime statistics. They are accurate, they are timely, and they are what guide this department. I'm not here to provide cover for anyone or protect anyone's flanks, except my cops, who are working to protect you and your families and the companies that you lead. And I'm here personally for three reasons, professionally for three reasons. First is because 2 years ago, I saw a department I love, that I loved since I was a little boy who checked this book out of the Boston Public Library, a boy in Boston, 8, 9 years old, dreaming of someday coming to New York City and maybe being a New York cop. Now I've been privileged twice to be commissioner of this greatest of police departments. I came back to deal with this department that was dealing with incredibly low morale. I'm here to fix that morale by giving the cops the leadership, the autonomy, and the resources they deserve. To be the cops they can be, the cops they want to be cops that count, to be cops that matter. Second, I'm here to close a gap between those officers and the communities they serve, some of which, particularly our minority communities, were pushed away by overused police practices like stop, question, and frisk. And third, I'm here to make sure that this department does what it does better than any other police department in this country or the world. What Sir Robert Peel charged all police with 186 years ago: prevent crime and disorder, and in modern New York, the constant threat of terrorism. But always, always to do it constitutionally, within the law, and respectfully. You can't break the law to enforce the law. These three things, the cops, motivated, supported, and effective, the city's many diverse communities, and we are the most diverse city in the world, bar none, and the constantly changing crime, disorder, and threat picture. That's why I am here. Because taking together, they add up to true public safety. They add up to one city, safe and fair, everywhere for everyone. And we're achieving that, we're creating that, and I will not, under any circumstances, encourage my cops, your cops, to break the law in response to media-driven or politically motivated hyperbole. Because we're on the verge of something new, with new programs, new tools, new technology, new ways of policing, new ways of working with the people we serve. I'm going to talk about all of these today, but there are also more complete descriptions available on our recently released plan of action, which can be found on our website. The address is right behind me on the screen, and also in the 5 T's pamphlet, which is on your table. 5 T's is a synopsis of that plan of action. It is the blueprint of where we're going over the next several years. Of course, none of this would matter if we couldn't perform our basic mission of preventing crime and disorder. And we are doing that. This summer was the safest in 25 years, and we're trending to have lower major crime numbers than any time in the past 55 years. If you read the papers, you wouldn't know that. There's no denying that we had a tough weekend this past weekend. This year, we've averaged about 1 homicide a day. Over this past week, we averaged 2. I remember when the city averaged 6 a day, every day, day in and day out. I get on my BlackBerry every shooting, every murder, every rape, every bank robbery in the city, 24 hours a day. I am intimately aware of up and down and the details of what's going on in the city. But I also see the trends beyond the 24 hours, beyond the day. And despite the spike in violent crime over this past weekend, ours are good. among the best they have ever been, and among the best in this nation at this time. Let's get beyond the hype of the pundits and the political opportunists. Over the last 20 months, and I'll speak to my 20 months as Commissioner, we've seen exceptional numbers for overall crime and violent crime. And we've done it with less intrusive, better targeted enforcement activity and fewer civilian complaints against my cops. The chart here reflects overall crime from 1993 to 2015. As you see, 2015 is shaping up to be the lowest crime year in the last 20 years. With regard to that overall crime, which this chart shows, we're on track to beat the previous best year, 2010, which saw just over 105,000 major crimes. And what are those major crimes? They're the Part 1 index crimes, as we describe them. That's the murder, rape, robbery, felony assault, burglary, grand larceny, and vehicle thefts. Actually, for the first time in the modern era, since at least 1960, we may be on track to have fewer than 100,000 major reported Part 1 crimes. In a city with over 1 million more people and tens of millions of more victims, tens of millions of more visitors, tourists, and others than we had back in that time. It'll be close getting under that 100,000, but it's certainly a goal worth striving for. And I'm a great believer in goal setting for my department, for your police department. Last year, the chart that you're seeing now, burglaries and robberies saw all-time record lows, with numbers down 84% or more from 1990, when I first came to New York as Chief of the Transit Police. Burglary was down 3.8% from 2013 to 2014, and robbery was down another astounding 13.5%. Robberies pushed up a bit, as reported in the papers this morning, about 1.5% so far, but we're only 9 months into the year. And even if robberies were to stay up at that level, it would be the second lowest year for robberies in the history of the city. But burglary is beating last year's all-time low by an additional almost 12% year-to-date. Like robbery, homicides are also unfortunately up. This weekend certainly aggravated that increase. We're up by 22 homicides from this time last year. But last year was the lowest year for murders since the 1950s. And even if the current trend continues, we will still end the year at a pace of less than a murder a day in a city that in the 1990s was experiencing 6 a day. And despite this year's increase, we will have the third lowest year for homicide in modern history. The fact is that for most categories of crime, we've entered a new era. For a better illustration of this, let's look at one subcategory of violent crime, shootings, that occupy so much attention in the media, and appropriately so. So far, despite what happened with shootings this weekend, this year is flat compared to last year. As of Sunday, 2014 and 2015, each had 854 shootings to date. The NYPD first started tracking shootings as a separate subcategory of felony assault in 1994, when Jack Maple came in and helped to create CompStat. Back then, there were 5,269 shootings out of more than 40,000 felony assaults. 1 out of every 8 felony assaults was a shooting. Starting with the introduction of CompStat in 1994, when I was Commissioner the last time, the NYPD started focusing, as you know, on crime in a new way. Within 4 years, shootings were down by nearly 40%. And then starting in 2003, shootings began to follow a new pattern. What you're about to see is a chart showing shootings compounding day by day through the course of a year. This is 2003. As we move further into the year, January, April, October, the total number of shootings climbs, ending for 2003 with 1,580 shootings. Here's 2004, which follows a similar pattern, ending with a lesser number, 1,481 shootings. Over the next 8 years, we see the same basic pattern from 2005 to 2012, sometimes up, sometimes down, but with a 10-year average of 1,489. Remember the over 5,000 that we were experiencing in the mid-1990s. And in 2013, shootings started low and they stayed low. The cause? Probably Commissioner Kelly's use of Operation Crew Cut and gang takedowns, which targeted offenders instead of relying on random street stops. In fact, by this time, stop, question, and frisk was already down 72% from its peak in 2011. When Mayor de Blasio appointed me police commissioner in 2014, keeping shootings at or below this new level became one of our goals. It wasn't easy, but through new plans like Summer All Out and targeted enforcement against the individuals and groups, the crews, the gangs, who do most of the shootings in the city, estimated, factually documented that over 50%, but we estimate probably closer to 80% of the shootings are committed by gangs in the city. 2014 was kept in line with 2013. It takes more than two to make a trend, though. In 2015, with an even more focused application of our Operation All Out Summer Initiative, as well as others, the NYPD showed that we indeed created a new normal for shootings. So crime is down, but I know that the perception exists that it's not. Perception sometimes, unfortunately, becomes a reality, but you need to be exposed to the reality. Crime is down, and my prediction is that we will have the capability to keep it going down. Now it's time for a reality check. I want to quote from Crain's. Last month, Crain's said, "With 2/3 of the year in the books, the New York City economy can be boiled down to this. The continuing expansion can now be called a boom, and the city's most pressing problems are, in part, a consequence of that boom times." One of the papers this morning was touting a significant increase in crime on the subways. You know what that increase was? About 100 crimes over the last 9 months. About 100 crimes over the last 9 months. If you take 6 million people a day and multiply it by the 8 months, 240 days, 100 crimes, you have a very small chance of being the victim of a crime in the subway. Back in 1990, I was experiencing 50 to 70 major crimes a day on a system with almost half the ridership. Tourism has climbed beyond 56 million a year, and is projected to cross 58 million in 2015. Broadway revenue is up 39% over the past 10 years. Visitors are up, the economy is up, construction is up. We're ranked 7th for job growth in the tech job sector, with major players like Google and Facebook holding significant office space in New York. Many of you know that Google has almost 5,000 employees in the city of New York? I didn't know that. What does this have to do with the NYPD? Well, growth like this happens when people feel safe and when they are safe. If you make it safe, they will come. Beginning in the 1990s, beginning with David Dinkins pushing through a tax bill to hire 6,000 more cops, Mayor Giuliani coming in focused on crime, and continuing through Mayor Bloomberg from that time forward, now with Mayor de Blasio, the issue of crime and disorder control is a priority for every mayor and every police commissioner. That does not change as administrations change. But I believe, as Crain said, that quite a few of the consequences we're dealing with currently are as a result of our success. There's no one in American policing who believes more in quality of life policing and broken windows than I do. There's a document, copies available outside. Those of you interested in a little deep dive about broken windows, quality of life policing, I suggest you take it, because it is what, in fact, saved this city and what will continue to save this city. We shall continue to employ broken windows, focusing on the little things to keep them from getting big things, always within the law. And we've shown that broken windows works. Last spring, the NYPD published the detailed comprehensive report pictured on the screen. For those of you who enjoy, as I said, statistical deep dives, there are copies available outside. George Kelling, the co-author of the original essay that gave us broken windows as a concept, has said it gives proof to his theory, as if the crime decline in this city were not enough. But those who call broken windows into question decided to ignore the report when it was issued. They didn't critique it or contest it. They ignored it. Why? Possibly because they knew they could not refute it. Instead, they seek to conflate quality of life policing with stop, question, frisk. These two things are totally different. They are not the same. They involve very different legal standards. Stop, question, and frisk involves something called reasonable suspicion, whereas quality of life enforcement involves probable cause. The officer sees the crime or offense being committed, or he has a witness, the complaining witness, to that offense. Stop, question, and frisk has not gone away. It is an essential tool of American policing. We're just doing less of it. Quality of life policing has not gone away. In fact, it will be increasing. But we'll be doing it in ways in which officers have more discretion. An oral warning versus a summons versus an arrest only as a last resort. They'll be being trained on de-escalation rather than escalation. We arrest people not for suspicion or whim, but because of complaints of behavior. Recently, certain kinds of behavior in Times Square have received a surprising amount of focus over the last month or so, but maybe appropriately so. It is the crossroads of the world. All those 56 million tourists, I can guarantee every one of them goes through that square while they're here. But let's begin with this. Claiming that current conditions are comparable to the square of 25 years ago is preposterous. I was in that square 25 years ago. Back then, porno theaters, peep shows, sex shops lined the streets within and around Times Square. Prostitutes plied their trade in the theaters and on the avenues and in the alleys. Wolf packs, marauding wolf packs, were a frequent occurrence in the square. The drug trade was in full cry, and destitute addicts haunted the sidewalks and the subways. Thieves and thugs were everywhere, and crime was rampant. Today's Times Square is flooded, not with criminals and thieves, but day and night with tourists and their children. High-end office buildings, commercial establishments, and legitimate theaters are the norm. Gone are the open-air drug deals, streetwalkers, and other signs of serious disorder. The area records about one major crime a day. 350,000 people go through the subway system below it, 500,000 in the streets above it, and about one crime a day. Last week, I think we had 4 or 5 days in a row without a single reported major crime in that area. Also, I think you're aware, a task force has been formed, has been meeting, and we will issue a report on or about October 1st as to going forward with Times Square. We have an increasingly pressing problem with the homelessness. In the shelters or on the streets, we're seeing more people in need of assistance. The increases are real. For the first 6 months of 2015 versus the same period in 2014, 311 calls about homeless encampments were up about 105%. There were a total of about 29 of them in the city, and we are slowly dismantling them, as I did back in 1994 when there were hundreds. Right now, we have documented about 29, although that number is less than that because we've been closing them down. Calls for homeless assistance are up by 190%. As police, we don't address it as a condition. We address the behavior of some of that population. The almost 40% of that population that have significant emotional problems, the 2% of them that have severe emotional problems that make so much of the news around this issue. That's what broken windows policing is about dealing with disorderly behavior, aberrant behavior, but dealing with it with appropriate discretion. But implementing broken windows and the idea that you have to stop small stuff before it becomes big stuff has to always be done within the law. With regard to dealing with some of the disorder in Times Square or homelessness throughout the city, particularly here in Manhattan, the laws have changed dramatically since I first instituted broken windows in the city and in the transit system 20 and 25 years ago. Laws against disorderly conduct, loitering, bending, begging, and public nudity have been partially or wholly decriminalized by court cases or changes to the law by both our Supreme Court as well as New York courts. The City Council is attempting to loosen these laws even further. Crazy. Under no circumstances do I think this is advisable or wise. We cannot decriminalize certain behavior because then it effectively removes one of the more powerful tools my officers have to deal with it. All these changes make enforcement more difficult because legally there are a lot of complexities as to what constitutes nuisance. This is why we're creating a new unit in Times Square. 120 officers will be assigned full-time there, volunteer officers. The officers assigned to will be specifically trained to negotiate the nuance of nuisance. And today I'm announcing also the creation of a new 38-officer unit, similar to the unit at Times Square, that will be stationed at 125th Street up in Harlem to deal with the extraordinary conditions up in that community. Conditions that are fostered in many respects because of the many outreach entities that are located in that very small, concentrated area. Methadone clinics, halfway houses, homeless shelters. The area has more than its share. And to deal with that, I need specially trained officers, also volunteer officers, who will be focused on dealing with that area. All those officers will receive crisis intervention training and peddler enforcement training, as well as how to deal better with the homeless population, and particularly the emotionally disturbed in that population. Over the next year, 10,000 of my officers will receive 4 days of custom-designed, specialized training on dealing with the emotionally disturbed, understanding all the various symptoms of all the various illnesses that they face, so that we can better serve that particular portion of the population that, through no fault of their own, have mental conditions that need to be addressed. These efforts in Times Square, up on 125th Street, are just examples of what's included in the larger plan of action that has recently been issued. Yesterday, I read with great interest the comments from many politicians in the city about doing more, hiring more police. Don't they read the papers? We are hiring more police. About doing more, we have a plan of action. If you want to see what we're going to do about the crime and the disorder, read that plan of action. It's the result of a great deal of effort over the last year to point the way as we did in 1994 with, like Babe Ruth, pointing to where we're going to hit the home run. That plan of action will be implemented. That plan of action will continue to keep this city safe. That plan of action will, in fact, make this city even safer as we go forward. The plan of action, and you have a synopsis of it at your table, and I ask that you take it with you and read you, is built on the concept of 5 T's. The first T, tackling crime. Officers in a neighborhood who get to know the people in the neighborhood, the good people, the bad people, the neighborhood people get to know them. In some respects, during David Dinkins' time, there was an initiative, the beat cop is back. Well, they're not going to be on a beat, they're going to be on a sector. They'll be working out of cars, but 3 hours a day, they'll be out of those cars working that sector. They'll have ownership. And it includes a new position also, the neighborhood coordinating officer, volunteer officers, 2 officers in each of those sectors, 4 sectors to each precinct, who are also volunteering and committing to working intimately with the communities they serve. Most of you, I don't think, are aware from the period 2001 through 2013, the NYPD lost 6,000 officers. All the officers we gained with the initiative that Mayor Dinkins began in the early 90s, that Mayor Giuliani and I were able to use, starting in 2001 in response to a lot of the budget crises the city was facing, 6,000 cops. That's an average of about 80 cops per precinct gone. Well, this year, this mayor, for the first time, is bringing them back. We will, by this time next year, have the equivalent of 2,000 additional police officers. None of them on the street yet, but they'll be coming to deal with some of the issues we talked about keeping crime down, about dealing more effectively with the disorder, dealing more compassionately with the homeless problem. 1,300 new cops, 400 civilians that I can then release 400 cops from duty in precinct station houses to join those 1,300 on the streets. Last year, we civilianized 200 positions with 200 cops returned to duty. 500 new cadets, young men and women who will eventually become police officers, but who can free up other police officers from clerical functions. Again, the equivalent of 2,000 new cops, the first increase in decades. The second initiative is new training. We're training those new cops in new ways. We're both going back to basics and breaking new ground. We're establishing a full-scale field training program for our newest officers, modeled after the LAPD, which I was privileged to lead for 7 years. New cops will be partnered for their first 6 months with specially selected volunteer field training officers who'll mentor them, who'll guide them. They won't be assigned to impact teams going out into the most violent crime neighborhoods of the city, fresh from the academy, with minimal supervision. Instead, they'll go to every precinct in this city. They'll work with volunteer officers and learn the job the right way. Because what they learn in that first year on the job is going to shape how they perform for the next 20 years. We have also reintroduced recurring training for the first time. 3 days of intensive training in managing street encounters and de-escalating tense situations. 3 days of training on top of the 2 days of firearms training they received that has allowed this department to have one of the lowest uses of firearm usage in America. The third T, technology, includes body cameras and our smartphone technology. Cy Vance is in the audience. I want to thank the district attorney for contributing hundreds of millions of dollars of his forfeiture funds to the hundreds of millions of dollars that the city receives to fuel that technology advance. 35,000 smartphones, custom designed, that'll be in the hands of every one of my police officers by March. 7,000 of them will have those smartphones for the Pope's visit, so we can blast out alerts to them. I can reach all of them at the same time with important messages around safety, you name it. And the apps that we are installing are just phenomenal. We're installing also 750 miles of fiber optic cable, so every one of my police precincts can have instant access to computers and speed. Patrol officers in the field will also be able to use automated foreign language translation services on those smartphones, access universal search capabilities, complete all of our department forms on the smartphone. Just think of all the trees we're going to save compared to all the paper I have to normally pump out, and even take fingerprints on the smartphone. With regard to the fourth T, counterterrorism, Ray Kelly, my predecessor, did a phenomenal job building the platform that we now stand on and build, the foundation, if you will. But terrorism is changing, and we need to constantly change with it. The threat has changed dramatically in just the past year alone. Organized attacks like the one in Paris remain part of the threat picture, but now there is also the lone wolf model of ICES. To address this new, more complicated reality, the NYPD has created the Counterterrorism Critical Response Command, or CRC. Instead of drawing more than 350 cops from the precincts every day, we'll have 400 officers assigned full-time to counterterrorism duties, where they'll be constantly training. They'll be equipped with, specialized vehicles, specialized weaponry. They will be a significant increase in our capability to keep this city safe. The fifth T, building trust. Trust with the cops and trust with the community. Also, Richard Emery, who is now doing a phenomenal job leading the CCRB, he's been able to reduce the length of time it takes for an investigation of a complaint from 271 days from intake to 77 days to time of board review. It's very beneficial to the cops because they can't promote or transfer if they have an open CCRB complaint. Very beneficial to the member of the public complaining because the complaint is resolved much more quickly through mediation, through potential other resolution, up to and including a trial. Let me point out something, if I may. A report recently issued by the CCRB didn't get much attention. I've got 35,000 cops. 32,000 of them have not had a complaint made against them. 3,000 have. Of that 3,000, about 300 have had about 3 or more complaints. So we have a small core of officers who receive the majority of complaints. Oftentimes, those officers are assigned to some of our most strategic and active units. So this is a police department that is significantly under control in terms of its officer behavior. Not the picture you might see sometimes by the unfortunate event which occurred 2 weeks ago outside this hotel, as well as some other highly publicized and deservedly highly publicized actions by some of my officers. We are committed, our NYPD, to making today and tomorrow and every day thereafter a better day for every one of you, for every New Yorker and every one of our 56 million visitors, because this is what it means to achieve one city, safe and fair, everywhere, for everyone. Thank you.